Hey, Steve Lindsley, welcome back to my shop. In this video, I'm going to show you how I turned this little cedar bowl that I roughed out. I think it was like last August or something like that. So it's been sitting on the shelf for a while. It's more than dry. It's ready to turn. This was the one, if you watched that video, that had a cedar log that had been pretty much invaded by carpenter ants. So there was a lot of insect damage and some punky parts to it. So some of them have fallen out, so we'll have to do something with those. So we're going to turn this little bowl. If we get a chance, have enough time, I'm going to do this smaller one as well. Let's maybe make a little candy dish or something out of it. I turned it at the same time as the other one, so it should be ready. It's more than ready to go. So if we get a chance, we'll turn both of those. So stick around and I'll show you how I finish these two little cedar bowls. Well, the first bowl's on the lathe, and the main objective here is just to true up the tenon. So we're going to just take the bowl gouge and do that. It was actually not too bad as far as being out around, so it didn't really take a lot to clean it up. Here we're going to work on the outside of the bowl. I just have the tailstock pushing the bowl up against the four-jaw chuck, so that's really the only thing holding it on there. Cedar's a pretty soft wood, so it actually cuts pretty easy. Actually cuts nice. It smells nice. Makes the shop smell nice when you're turning it. So we just kind of give it a shape that we liked and called it good. I kept checking the different areas there as I was doing it. We're never going to turn away all of the defects in it, but we're trying to get rid of some of them as we're turning the outside shape. Now that we got the outside turned pretty much shape we want, I'm going to take my negative rake scraper and try and get rid of any tool marks or torn grain or any defects that I would have to sand out. So the more time I spend with this scraper trying to clean the outside of this bowl up, the less time I'll have to spend sanding. So anytime that happens, that's always a good thing. So I check it here in a couple of spots and see some more torn grain, so I just keep scraping it until I get it to where it's acceptable. Then we can just use sandpaper on the outside to clean the rest of it up. Well, the bowl's turned around and being held in a four-jaw chuck, and what we're going to do is just start working on the inside of it. First thing I want to do is clean up the rim a little bit, make it round. It was a little out of round, so we just cleaned that up. And then I'm just using a 1/2-inch bowl gouge to start cleaning the inside of this bowl out. I'm only going to go part of the way down due to the depth of the bowl, so we'll work on the top third of it or so, or maybe top half, and get it turned down to what we want it, the thickness that we want, and then we'll kind of go on from there and turn the bottom part. Now that I have the tool rest where I want it, we can go ahead and clean out the bottom part of this bowl. I'm continuing on with my 1/2-inch bowl gouge, and we're just going to reduce the thickness of the bowl down to get it to match somewhat to match the outside of the shape of the bowl, and get the walls to a consistent thickness. Now I'm going to switch to a round carbide cutter. clean this up. This really works good on the on this soft cedar wood, so it's nice and easy to clean it out and get it to more refinement of the thickness and the inside shape to match the outside of the bowl. Here I check it with thickness with my little tester and my little homemade depth gauge as well. So keep checking those and make sure that we don't turn too far or get it too thin. And I'll finish off the inside with my negative rake scraper, just clean it up and remove any tool marks and torn grain. What I want to do is fill some of these holes with some epoxy, so I've taken some painter's tape and put it on the inside of the hole to kind of as a backstop, so when I put epoxy in it, it stays where I want it and it doesn't dripping inside the bowl. So what I have is just some 5-minute epoxy. I'm mixing up a little sawdust, a little turning dust in there with it, kind of color the epoxy. And while it's turning a little bit darker, it did come out with a similar tone or different color-wise, so it doesn't look bad. Problem is I should have waited till the epoxy started to set up a little bit, because every time I put it in there, it would try and run down the side of the bowl, so I spent a lot of time just kind of moving it back where I wanted it. I let the epoxy set up for quite a while. I'm not sure exactly how long, but I know it was longer than 5 minutes, might have been an hour or so. So here what I'm doing is I'm just taking my 1/2-inch bowl gouge and trying to knock off some of the high spots on the epoxy. It took me a couple of tries or a couple of fills with the epoxy to get it to where it was flush. I had some air pockets and a couple of spots where it was below the level of the bowl, so it took me a couple of times to fill them up. But eventually they got up to the point where they were the repair was even with the outside of the bowl. So once I finished turning that off with the bowl gouge, of course I used my negative rate scraper. I don't know how I lived before I got this tool. Seems like I use it on practically everything, but it does a great job of cleaning up. It did a good job of cleaning up the epoxy as well, and the epoxy sanded up nice and finished well, as you'll see later in the video. Here's a project we've been working on. I've sanded it up through 400 grit. Before I quit working on it last weekend, I thought I would put on a wash coat of sanding sealer, which is unwaxed shellac, really. So I wanted to seal it up a little bit, and then my plan was for the finish regiment was a couple of coats of sanding sealer and then spray it with some satin lacquer. So after I sanded it, I went ahead and thinned out some sanding sealer and put it on the piece. And what happened was it cracked it in several spots, particularly around the end grain. I don't know how well you can see it here, but it cracked right along the grain. So there's actually a crack that goes right through here, and then it actually cracked cross grain as well. So there's a crack that goes this way. So that was bad enough, but it did it on this other side. Same thing. It's cracked along the grain here, and then it's got two big cracks that go down this way, and then this one's really bad. It goes all the way down to there, and the piece you can actually push it out, if you can see that, but it actually moves. Both of them move. I thought about repairing it maybe with some CA glue or something, but I just don't think that that's going to work out all that well. So I think what I'll do is just somewhere along down in here, I'll just make this bowl a little bit make it a little bit shorter, so I'll wind up with another candy dish basically. The good news is the patches I put in with the epoxy and the sawdust, they cleaned up pretty nice. They're a little darker than the wood, but they got the same general color, so it doesn't look too bad. So that's what I'm going to do. I've never actually had that happen before where the piece cracked. I did turn it pretty thin. It's only turned about 1/8 of an inch thick on the side. So I did turn it down pretty thin. I think probably what happened, and I could be wrong, is when I put the sanding sealer on, it had a lot of alcohol in it, and the alcohol flashes off pretty fast. It was a nice dry day here, and so the alcohol was flashing off, and whenever it evaporates like that, it cools the piece. So I think it just cooled it too fast, and it was thin, and there was probably some stress in there anyway, and then the thing went ahead and starting to crack. That's my theory. I could be wrong about that, but I don't know what else would have done it, because it didn't have any cracks in it when I started putting the sanding sealer on it. So got a design modification on this piece, so we're just going to go ahead. We'll put it back on the lathe and cut it off here somewhere and get rid of these cracks and the broken pieces on this piece, and then we'll just finish up the bottom. I think what I'll do is, and probably what I should have done in the first place, I think I'll just go back to my normal finish that I put on these things with some Triple E and then some shell wax, and it'll be like a hard wax coating. I think that's what I'm going to do. So let's get it back on the lathe and see if we can salvage part of this piece. I have no idea what would possess me to think that this top of this bowl was going to stay in one piece once I cut it off. I brought the tailstock up thinking, all right, well, it's going to come off in a piece, and the tailstock will catch it and it'll be good, but it didn't actually come off that way. It comes off in multiple pieces. Fortunately, they just kind of went here and there and didn't cause any injury or any damage. Well, now that I got that done, I'm going to clean up the rim there, and I'm going to use, yep, you guessed it, a negative rake scraper. So we're just going to clean up the rim and round it off. It was pretty rough from being cut off by the parting tool, so it's just a matter of rounding it inside and cleaning it up, and then clean up the outside. And I did sand it after it was done, so that worked out all right. Time for finish on this piece, so I'm going to use my Triple E Ultra Shine for the first coat, which is cleans it up pretty nice, kind of finishes it up. I sanded the bowl up through 400, so you just put it on and then wipe it off. It gives a little bit of a shine, but what it does, it really smooths it out, gives it a nice finish. The second thing I want to use is shell wax. Unfortunately, my jar for shell wax broke, so I got it in a mason jar, so I didn't show that. It really wasn't much to look at. So there it is, shined up and looking good. I have the bowl turned around and put in some larger jaws, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the tenon off the bottom. I'm just going to, well, there I'm just trying to see if it was running true, which it is. I'm just going to use a 1/2-inch bowl gouge and use some push cuts and pull cuts just to remove that tenon, and do a little scrape in there to kind of blend it in with the side. Once we get it down, the little nib actually just popped off, so I took care of that. Sharpened up the scraper, and I'm going to use that to clean it up to remove any tool marks or torn grain. I did sand it up through 400 like the rest of the bowl, so that worked out pretty well. That jaws do a pretty good job of holding the bowl. And the finish was the same as what I put on the rest of the bowl with the Triple E and the shell wax. After I got the bowl out of the jaws, I noticed that the hold down on the jaws had left some marks on the bowl that I couldn't buff out. So I got out the Beal buffing system. It's not a system I use very often, but it does a good job of cleaning up the outside of this bowl. The first wheel has a Triple E compound, which is a buffing compound. The second wheel has one called white diamond, which basically removes the tripoli from the outside of the surface. And then the last one is a carnauba wax that buffs up the outside of the bowl. Like I said, it's not something I use very often, and you actually have to do a good job of hanging onto the bowl because the wheel will grab the thing and send it flying around the shop. So if you can master that part, it works real well, and I was very pleased with the final result. Here's bowl number 2 on the lathe. The process is pretty much the same as the last one. We're going to clean up the tenon. It didn't really take much. It really wasn't out around that much, so just a little bit of a touch up there on that. And then we're going to take the 1/2-inch bowl gouge and turn the outside to a shape that I like. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and use the scraper again to clean up any tool marks and torn out grain. The bowl's turned around and being held in the 4-jaw chuck, so we're just going to take our 1/2-inch bowl gouge and the carbide cutter scraper and clean up the inside, and keep checking the thickness with our measuring gauge to make sure that we're not turning it too thin. I did leave this bowl thicker than my last one. I didn't want to repeat the problem with the cracking, so this one is thicker than the last one I turned. This bowl didn't have any holes that went all the way through, but it did have a large area that needed repair. I just pretty much followed the same process. There it is there, and it needs a little bit more filling to get it to where it's can be finished. Here's the inside of the bowl as I'm putting the finish on. I used the same finish that I used showed earlier, so it did a nice job cleaning up the inside of that bowl and making it look real nice. So it's got a nice shine on it, and it makes the grain look real nice. Well, I got the bowl turned around. I finished the outside of it, and I have it in the large jaws again. And again, the process is the same. Clean up the bottom, sand it, and put some finish on it. Then once we get that part done, this bowl will be finished. Here's our 2 cedar bowls finished up. The one on the right was actually the one that started out being the taller of the 2, but with the cracking problems I had, it wound up being the junior version of these 2, I guess. That's all right. Sometimes the wood decides it's going to do something, and we as wood turners have to make adjustments and design modifications as we work on the project. So it still turned out nice. It'll make a nice little candy dish, I think. Or potpourri or whatever you want to put in it. And the one on the left has been returned to one of my coworkers, and she's going to return it to her mother, who actually gave me the cedar log that these bowls were returned from. So it's kind of being returned to where it came from. So I like that a lot. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and as much as I've enjoyed making the project. So I thank you for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe.